Hello learners, welcome to Education Online. I'm teacher Regina Massimo, presenting you a topic in biology. Biology Senior 3 and 4. Our topic of today is binomial nomenclature, or it means double naming. It means double naming. So double naming or binomial nomenclature is a scientific system. Binomial nomenclature is a scientific system. Scientific system of naming living organisms. Living organisms. Which give two names to an organism. Gives two names to an organism. Binomial nomenclature, or the meaning is double naming, and this is scientific system of naming living organism. It gives two names to an organism. So what are these two names? The two names, that means scientific names is made up of two names. The two names are genus name and species name, are combined together and become scientific name of an organism. That's why binomial nomenclature, it has connection with classification. That's why you can see this chart here with classification of some organisms. Classification of man, housefly, and maize. So don't wonder by seeing is still classification there. Binomial nomenclature has relationship with classification of living organisms, because the double naming here, we said that it is genus name, made up of genus name, and species name. So when you look at this chart, the classification, because these are the classification unit, we learned about it last time. It's starting with the largest unit and ends with the smallest unit. So the kingdom of man is known as Animalia, housefly, Animalia also, but maize is a plantae. So when you look at these names here, they start with capital letters, but reaching to the name of the species, it starts with small letters: sapiens, domestica, maize. This one written like this purposely, is not by chance. In the classification, the name of a species should start with a small letter, but the name of the rest of the units, it starts with capital letter. So since I say that the binomial nomenclature is the scientific name, is a system of giving scientific names for the living organism, and the scientific names is made up of two parts. The first part is genus name, and the second part is the species name. So if you are writing the scientific names, that means you start with genus name that is start or begins with capital letter. While writing the species name, the name should start or begins with a small letter. That's why in classification, normally you'll find the name of the species start with a small letter. Here the examples are clear. That means from this classification, you can extract the scientific name for the 3 living organisms. Just from the explanation you have had. The scientific name of each and every living organism is made up of 2 parts. The first part is a genus name. The second part is a species name. So from the classification here, the genus name for man is Homo. The genus name for housefly is Musca. The genus name for males is Z. The species name for man is Sapiens. The species name for housefly is Domestica. The species name for maize is maize. Since you have been provided with the name of genus and species for these 3 organisms, that means automatically here you can name or compose the scientific name for man. So for example, the scientific name for man is Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens. This is the name of man. When I say man, I mean human being. Whether it is a woman, man, female, male, it is human being in general. That means the name for human being, the scientific name for human being is Homo sapiens. The common name is man or human being. The scientific name for housefly is Musca domestica. Musca domestica. The scientific name for maize is Z maize. This is for housefly. Housefly. Z maize. This is the scientific name for maize. So when we say man, housefly, maize, these are common names. These are called common names. Man, housefly, maize, these are common names. And common names, it differ from place to place, from tribe to tribe, from nation to nation. But scientific names, is used all over the world. That means any biologist, whether from South Sudan, from US, from South Africa, any biologist, when you say Homo sapiens, he knows what you mean. That means you mean the human being. When you say Musca domestica, automatically he knows you mean housefly. When you say Z maize, he knows what you mean is a maize or maize plant. So it is known all over the world. But common names differ from place to place, from nation to nation, from country to country, from tribe to tribe, like that. So this system of double naming is developed by biologists known as Carlos Linus, and he was the first to develop the advanced classification of living organisms. That was in 18th century. The double naming system is developed by a scientist. Double naming system. Double naming system was developed by a biologist. That biologist known as Carlos Linus. And that was in 18th century. Binomial nomenclature or double naming system was developed by Carlos Linus in 18th century. So the scientific name, writing of scientific names, it has rules. We don't write it just anyhow like that. It has rules. And that rules known as the principle of the binomial nomenclature. So now let us come and look at the principle of binomial nomenclature. The principles or rules, meaning rules of writing of binomial nomenclature. That means writing the scientific names has rules. We don't just write it like that. And this rule, you consider it the time you are writing the scientific name. It's serious. It's not for joke. If you are real scientist or real biologist, these scientific names, you need to follow its rules of writing it. So the rule number 1 says that the name is made up of 2 parts. The first part is made up of 2 parts, the scientific names. The first part is genus name. species name. This genus name should begin in capital letter. Should begins with capital letter. The genus name should begins with capital letter, like it is written here. This is the genus name for man. It starts with capital H. Genus name for housefly, it starts with capital M, mask. Genus name for maize, it starts with capital Z or Z, which is Z. This is the meaning. While the second part, which is the species name, should begin, or it begins with a small letter, as you have seen here. The species name for man is sapiens, with a small, it started with a small s. Its species name for housefly domestica, it started with a small d. Its species name for maize, it started with a small m. So this is the rule number 1. The scientific names is made up of 2 parts. The first part is genus name, should start with capital letter. The second part is species name, should start with a small letter. Then the rule number 2 says, this scientific name, if it is handwritten, if you are writing it in your exercise book, you should underline them separately. If the scientific name in handwritten underline them separately. If it is handwritten. But if you are typing it, that means print it in book, should be in italics. If it is printed, that means if you are typing it and to be printed, it should be in italics. Italics. For example, this Homo sapiens, if you want to write the scientific name for man, Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens. This in handwritten, you underline them as separate words. Like that. Don't join the line like this, like one word. No. You leave them as separate words. So now we have applied the two principles. First of all, it is made up of two names. The first one is the genus name. The second one is the species name. Genus name is started with capital letter. Homo is started with capital H. Sapiens is started with capital small s. Number two, we underline them as a separate words. We don't join the line. But if it is printed, that means should be in italics. In italics, that is in computer. You'll find the words like this. Will be like this, like. You'll find it going that side. So you don't underline it. If it is printed, just should be in italics. You don't underline it. You underline it when it is handwritten. In your exercise book, make sure that it is an underline. So let us come to the principle number 3. Principle number 3 says the scientific name is sometimes written with the name of a scientist who first adequately described and named the organism. So sometimes you'll find the scientific name is made up of 3 names. The third name here is the name of the scientist or the biologist who described or who named the living organisms. For example, you'll find bananas, balanoids, linus. So you underline this if it is handwritten. You'll find them written 3. So the last name is the name of the biologist or the scientist who discovered, who described, or who named the living organisms. So this is called author name. So we are done with the principle of double naming. Now let's come to see the importance of classification. Because as I said, binomial nomenclature has a relationship with classification. It's not different from classification. That's why we are coming to see the importance of classification. Why are we classifying living organisms? Of classification. Classification. Classification is very important because it provides organisms with names that have the same meaning to biologists all over the world. As I said, this scientific name is known by all the biologists all over the world. So the classification is very important because it provides names to the living organisms, has the same meaning for the biologists all over the world. Number 2, it helps identifying living organisms into their correct groups for references. So you can identify the group of living organisms correctly using the classification. Number 3, it helps us to arrange information about living organisms in an orderly manner to avoid chaos and confusion. It helps us to understand the evolutionary relationship. between different organisms. This point is very important. It helps us to understand the evolutionary relationship between different organisms. For example, you find in classification sometimes we are grouped with apes. We the human being, we are grouped with apes. This shows we are sharing the same ancestor. That means we develop from one ancestor. Then we come and we branch. Apes on that side, human being on that side. But we have the same ancestor. So we originated from the same. So I think up to here we are done with binomial nomenclature and the importance of classification. We are left with exercise. Let me write only 2 exercises, then we work on it. Exercise. Complete the below or the note below. Number 1 says, every living organism is given scientific name. Every organism is given scientific name using the and. Number 2, identifying organism by their genus. Identifying organisms by their genus and species. Names, which is scientific. Is called so up to here